Welcome to La Mesa, a space for real conversations that bring community, compassion, and understanding to the issues shaping lives in San Antonio. My name is Rick Gipprich Jr. I'm the program coordinator for the Collaborative Commission on Domestic Violence as part of the City of San Antonio Metropolitan Health District. We'll be talking today about two crises that are deeply connected: domestic violence and homelessness. For many survivors, the path to safety may not be an easy one, and leaving an abusive relationship can mean losing your home, your income, or your sense of stability. In fact, domestic violence is one of the leading causes of homelessness among women and families across the country, and right here in our own city. These issues remind us that homelessness isn't just about housing, it's about safety, it's about justice, and more importantly, it's about dignity. Over the next hour, we'll explore the roots of this problem, its impact on survivors and the San Antonio community, and the ways our city is responding, intervening, and breaking the cycle. Joining me today are Paige Theriot, the Director of Residential Services at Family Violence Prevention Services, and she also oversees the Battered Women and Children's Shelter and Housing Services. Paige, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on.
We also have Judith Marie Adrade. She is the program coordinator at Close to Home, which is the lead continuum of care agency in San Antonio and Bexar County.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And finally, we have Kathy Lacy, Human Services Administrator of Homeless Services and Strategy Department with the City of San Antonio.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Each of our guests brings a unique perspective and deep experience in addressing both domestic violence and homelessness. Now, let's begin by naming the problem and understanding how these two issues intersect and why that intersection matters for all of us. So let's get right into kind of naming what the problem is and some of the root causes of homelessness and domestic violence, because we know that those two things intersect with each other. And I don't think a lot of our community understands that. So let me ask you, what are the most common factors that lead survivors of domestic violence to become unhoused or housing insecure? And are there certain populations like women with children, LGBTQ plus folks, or other adults who face greater risks? And I'll open this up to whomever would like to respond.
Well, I think the commonality in all of that is it could be anybody. There's no lines drawn in the sand that it could be this person or that person. It's everybody that can be affected by domestic violence. We see all kinds. The forgotten is the men. There are also men who are experiencing domestic violence who call into the Community Connections Hotline for service and assistance. So I think we need to maybe rewire ourselves to think that it's not a problem that's just for one demographic or one certain group of people, that domestic violence, like everything else, can affect everybody.
I agree with that. And then I also think that it's a compounding factor. Somebody's choosing to leave. And when they choose to leave, they could subject themselves to experiencing housing instability. Mm-hmm. They face things like maybe if they've been through financial abuse, they face poor credit. They have a lack of employment. Maybe they were unable to work. If they face things like evictions, it's going to be hard for them to find new housing opportunities. Mm-hmm. And then when you talk about certain populations being affected, yes, all populations are affected, but even more so women with children. If they decide to go into shelter, maybe they're worried that their family might get separated. So it's deciding, do we go into shelter or do we stay in our vehicle?
Yeah.
Women with children can decide, well, let's leave my children with family members and I'll experience the homelessness and find resources on my own. LGBTQ individuals, we're really learning, these systems weren't made for them. Mm-hmm. So now we're learning, how do we fix it? So how do we make sure that they feel safe? So there's distrust with the system. Mm-hmm. So sometimes they would rather face the homelessness than going into shelter. And then with our older adults, times are way different. Completely. Things are expensive. People are living on fixed incomes. They might have chronic health conditions. Our shelters might not be able to support them. So just thinking about all those factors too.
And with the families with children, there's just not enough childcare that is affordable, and they often need to find a job to work, and then the children could get sick, have to be taken out of school. That could cause them to lose their job, so they face a lot of barriers as well.
What do y'all think is that deciding factor that someone has to, or question or decision they have to make, that they choose to not go into a shelter? where they choose to maybe stay in their vehicle, or they choose to maybe live out on the streets, and they just don't want to go in. Have you faced that, or is that an issue that you're having where people find it very difficult to come into your shelter or to ask for help? And why? Why do you think that is?
For some, communal living just is not something they want to do or choose to do. And it's difficult because everybody has different ways for their households, different cultures. And if any of us had to live together just for the weekend, we would find it very difficult, I think, as well. So I think it takes a real engagement with that person and trust, and maybe even explaining to them that you've been to the facility and explaining the rules, the situations, because some of them also want to live by their own rules. They want to live their life, and they don't want to abide by rules from the outside.
I think sometimes too it's the stigma. Homelessness or being unhoused has such a big stigma around it, right? I think sometimes that could be, if that's the only option, the stigma around being homeless is a reason why people stay, right? They don't truly understand that by being homeless and letting people know you're out there, that there's help available for you, that there's places you can go, there's people who are waiting for you to help you. And I think that's one of the reasons too. I think that's a cause, right, of people choosing to stay.
Yeah, and also just the misinformation. I think we have to do a good job of
or lack of, right?
Or the awareness. And I think that's where we all partner together, and we really want to make sure that we're collaborating and talking about, like, okay, what are the gaps you're seeing?
Right.
A lot of the times people think they need a police report to be able to go into the shelter. So when we talked with Family Violence, we're like, what are the things that people need to know in order to access the support? And that was probably the biggest one, is people think they need to seek a police or, have an active case. But it's, no, if you want to get out before it gets bad, definitely reach out. There's people there to listen.
When we look at a lot of issues that face folks in our community, you look at like racism, any kind of form of oppression, we all know that that is really the root cause, right? So things like being unhoused or domestic violence or sexual violence or experiencing abuse in any way, shape, or form, that's a symptom of a larger problem.
Yes, definitely.
And that larger problem are things like oppression and sexism and racism and all of those things. Can y'all talk a little bit about how those forms of oppression as root causes kind of affect the way a person who's experiencing domestic violence and is facing homelessness, how that impacts them in seeking services maybe, or wanting to get help?
I think people, if they have faced those challenges before, they kind of get scared to seek the help. And so if
just the distrust of the system.
The distrust of the system. And that's where we're working so hard to show people that we are here and we do care. So that's where I think they have to see us connecting. If they don't see our agencies connecting and communicating, then it seems like we're all working in silos, but we're really not. We're trying to make sure that people can access the services at any point. If they're in housing, they can call into the Community Connections hotline. If they're unhoused on the street, they can reach to a street outreach worker. So I think it's just meeting people where they're at and really trying to be that trauma-informed, survivor-centered. That's how we can get people to connect with our system.
And all those things, I'm sorry.
All for the survivors to be seen and heard by us and feel that.
And I was going to say, on the other side of that, all those things that you called out with labels, it's just one more label, right? Sometimes people just don't want to carry that.
Right.
People just don't want to be seen as this, right? All those other things have already been into play, and there's, like we said earlier, a distrust in the system already, where they feel like somebody has let them down. So what makes this situation so much different, right? So all of those things compound together. I agree with both of you. The misinformation, the lack of communication, all of those things matter when we're trying to get the word out that there is help there, right? So
both of you mentioned a resource that is available. Can you expand on that a little bit? I think you said it was Community Connections?
Yeah.
The Community Connections hotline.
Yes.
So the Community Connections hotline is operating for San Antonio and Bexar County, and it's the first door to resources, referrals, homelessness, homeless prevention. The operators there, domestic violence trained, right? They serve the whole city and Bexar County, and you can call in 210-207-1799, and you reach an operator, and they put you into the system in the homeless information system. But that's for everybody to see, right? It's not just the information for us. It's whenever you call, any agency that was within the COC can go in there and see you and see your story and provide better services for you.
That's an interesting way of processing someone. What happens to a person when they get in this system? And do you think that maybe being put into the system is part of that distrust that some folks have in the system, and also kind of reaching out to get help?
Well, I think the distrust is that you put yourself out there and become vulnerable and nobody reaches back out to you, right? But the system isn't designed for that. The system is designed through the assessments where they ask you these level of questions, and then based on your answer, it goes to close to home, who gives it to a provider, who makes sure that somebody is reaching back out to you. They contact family violence, they contact whoever they need to contact to see what we can do for you in the immediacy. And I think that's what people don't know. There's several parts of the homeless information system that people fall into, but it is prioritized through close to home to help individuals.
So I can talk a little bit about that. The assessment she's talking about is called a home link assessment, and so basically what it does is it triages you. So if we have people that are at risk of homelessness, experiencing homelessness, fleeing, or attempting to flee domestic violence. A lot of people don't know if you're attempting to flee, you're eligible for services. So they can get an assessment. The way our assessments work is it's a no wrong door approach. So you can call the hotline. We have access points throughout the city, and then our street outreach workers. And then if you go into emergency shelter, you're going to get that same assessment. I would say to learn more about accessing the assessment, you can go to our Close to Home website, and there's a tab that says Find Help, and it'll have all the access point information and the different interventions available. But we have prevention assistance as well, and you would call the Community Connections hotline for that. But that, again, people that are at risk of homelessness can reach that services. But we really, again, want to meet people where they're at, so there's different levels of triaging that we do within our system.
And like I said, I think the beauty of that is it's just not going into a system, it's going someplace, right? Where somebody can reach back out to you and still be able to meet you where you are, provide the services and support, wraparound services and support that you need to move you from this crisis to stability and sustainability. And I think that's the beauty of that system. And it's 78
Yes,
partners?
about 78 and growing.
Yeah, and growing partners within this system that can reach back out to you and give you what you need to help you.
So this system then was really designed to help.
Yes.
And it's not punitive in any way, shape, or form.
No.
Someone reaching out to Community Connections is not going to get in trouble. They're not going to be in fear if they call this number. It really is designed to kind of help them, right?
And we're always working to improve the system. Our goal is to make sure that we are, leading trauma-informed. So we reach out to family violence prevention services. They train our assessors on how to ask the questions. We're now going to work on implementing safety planning at all of our access points. So again, really trying to improve the experience for somebody that might be reaching out to our system for help.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about the impact that these two different issues kind of have on not just survivors, but on the San Antonio community as well, right? So I want to ask you, what are some of the short and long-term effects that housing instability can have on survivors' physical and emotional well-being? And what do you think the public misunderstands about survivors who experience homelessness due to domestic violence?
I think that the public misunderstands how difficult it is to leave a situation. It's more complicated than people think. It's the most dangerous time for a survivor to leave the abuser. And they're already in a situation that may have them depressed or anxious, and leaving and going to a shelter or being homeless is going to exacerbate that anxiety, depression, mental health. So they're dealing with a myriad of issues at one time, and sometimes it seems like people will say, we'll just leave, and it's not that simple.
Not
but
that easy.
Thank goodness there are resources that are there to help them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it increases 75% your risk of homicide when you're trying to leave a
Trying to
situation
leave,
after
yeah.
separation.
Yes, and I think the HUD statistic is 82% of people started their homeless journey with domestic violence. So domestic violence is prevalent, whether they're bringing that up or not, because it may have been a while ago.
Yeah, that's true. They don't always first report. They always try all these other things, right? Listen to the girlfriends, listen to the mom, and there's no real plan in that.
Right.
And I think that's why it keeps,
Cycling.
keeps cycling through. But I will agree with you. That is one of our biggest, which is why Close to Home said, hey, we need to get some, trained operators on the phone in domestic violence and working with you and collaborating with you all to make the assessment what it is, right? So we don't re-traumatize when they call and they tell you another story and tell you the story again. All the information is already in the system as the client is reporting it.
Yeah.
And
So that makes it
sometimes
definitely easier.
the survivor doesn't even realize that they're in a domestic violence situation.
No, that's true.
They may have been abused as a child, and it may be normalized
norm.
situation to them. And then it takes some education with them and working with them to realize that this is not what a healthy way to live.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead,
And I think
please.
as we kind of assessed the community, we went out and spoke to some people that were at the shelter. We realized that awareness is not out there.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
we have established a domestic violence subcommittee within our homeless response system, and it brings people from different sectors together. So how we can create solutions. So one of our solutions is we are working on a one-pager that we can launch to the community, asking those kind of prompting questions. Are you experiencing economic abuse? Are you afraid to go home? If you answered yes to any of these questions, here are some resources for you. So that's something that we're working on launching by the end of the month. But again, we got feedback from survivors on this document that we're releasing. We want to make sure that it is going to be something that's useful for people and accessible.
One of the things that I'm most proud of working for the city of San Antonio is the initiatives that the city has taken to ensure that every department, specifically those of us that are forward-facing, right, working specifically with the community, are trauma-informed, that we understand what it means to work with our community who are facing any type of strife or emotional instability or being unhoused or experiencing violence in some way, shape, or form. How important is that for the community to understand as well? And I ask that question because I feel like there are still some very public misunderstandings about, one, domestic violence, and two, the unhoused population, right? I feel like a lot of us sometimes will look at a person who is unhoused and think, well, if I can do this, you can do this. If I can succeed or if I can get a job, you can get a job. And I get it. I understand why folks may feel that way. But can we talk a little bit about the importance of what it means to not just be trauma-informed in the work that we do, but also what it means to be a trauma-informed community and why that's important too?
Go ahead.
Yeah. That was a lot. I
was going to piggyback off of what Paige said about the trauma. Most of the people who are on the street are living with some kind of trauma.
Right.
Whether it happened at childhood, whether it happened when they were older, death of a spouse, death of a kid, all of those things compounded, right, is why people are not function to societal norms, right? What you or somebody else may think is the norm for people, that is their norm. That's until we can get our hands on the person and get them to open up and release some of that. That was the only way that we're going to be able to help. Whether it's domestic violence or whether it's just our unhoused neighbors, there has to be a point where we don't see them as their situation, but see them as individuals that are dealing with something, right? So we do have our social workers on our outreach teams. throughout all of the agencies, I think, right, they have some kind of social workers out there to be able to provide that trauma-informed care support. And we are all at the city, of course, like you said, trauma-informed care certified, so we can go out and have those conversations. I don't know what you were going to say, Paige, but...
Well, I think putting it in a layperson's terms, people all start at different beginning points in their life. Somebody may have experienced more abuse. That may put them you may have a head start on being healthy. And that person has barriers to catching up to that. Also, they need to be able to process this with a professional, hopefully, because processing it, sometimes they'll process it with peers, and that can be helpful. But really getting in and doing the work sometimes brings up the ugliness, and they're trying to push it down, repress it, and that's keeping them in that state, in that space. And sometimes people just can't catch up because they're in that space. And so if people understand that, when your cup is full, whether it's the small cup or a big cup, your cup is full. And sometimes coping is like that. Some people may be able to cope, have different coping mechanisms that are per se better or more positive, and that but when the cup is full, the cup is full.
I want to talk a little bit about response and intervention, and we've kind of talked a little bit about resources that are available to our community and talked about what each of you do, but I want to give you some time individually to really go into depth about what resources currently exist in San Antonio, specifically with each of your own respective agencies, that help survivors who experience these two kind of crises intersected together.
Okay, well, with Family Violence Prevention Services, we have a residential, which I oversee, and we have a non-residential section. The same resources are provided in each. However, in the non-residential, we provide batterers intervention program, and we find that to be helpful because if we could stop the battering and start working on the issues of batterers, then maybe there wouldn't be any more victims. That's in a perfect world. But we are working on that. So we have legal services that do protective orders, child custody, and divorces from the abuser. We have counseling services residentially and non-residentially and for children. We have case management for adults and for children. We have an adult educator. We have a clinic. We have a donation center. I'm trying to think of everything we have. We have shelter monitors, which provide for the needs of the people at the shelter. We have a maintenance team, a kitchen team.
Talk about the kennel.
We have the kennel.
That's important.
For
That's
dogs
very
right
important.
now. So if people tend not to want to leave their animals, and especially with their abuser who has hurt them or will hurt them, and they can bring their dogs with them. They just have to tell them on the hotline that they have an animal, so we can make space and make sure everything is all good for that. We have the hotline, which is 210-733-8810, and that's how you get an assessment to come to the shelter, but also they can refer you to all the services inside of family violence. So we have a court liaison down at the courthouse. We have a military liaison. We have it about covered, and if we don't, then I'm going to refer you to one of these two ladies here to get some more referrals, or we have referrals to give out.
So what that tells me is that Family Violence Prevention Services is really embedded into almost every aspect of the system where a survivor could potentially enter, because we know that a lot of survivors don't enter the system immediately through law enforcement, right? Or through the criminal justice system. They are coming in through other parts. And so it's important that each of those systems works together, which is going to be my next question. But Is that a correct statement?
That's
that
correct.
You are embedded
and with
in
the
every part?
non-residential, this could have already been in your past, that you have a past history of abuse and access services, or you could still be living with the abuser and getting services that possibly they don't know about, and preparing yourself possibly to leave, which would be the goal. So there's different entryways, like you say, and the same services provided on each side. And then you could go to the shelter, and shelter's not for everybody.
Right.
So they may be able to work to do a safety plan so that there's another place that they could go that was safe, if that's their choice, because it's all based on their choice. They know their situation better than anybody else.
Yep.
There's one aspect of what you talked about in the services that you provide that I think is really important, mostly as a dog dad, the kennel,
Yes.
right? So why is that important? Why is that a service that you provide? And I ask that question because you're right. Most people, if I'm not leaving my pet, I'm not leaving this one person that I trust and love more than, other folks in my family, right? Why is that important for folks to know that you provide that service? Can you talk about that connection?
Yes, because they don't have to make a choice. They can come with their pet, and their pet is like a family member to them, like you say, and also someone, an entity that gives them a reason to get up in the morning. Sometimes you become so depressed if you're a survivor that you can't get up in the morning, but there's a reason to get up in the morning. There's a relationship. There's a caretaking relationship as well. So we want to foster that. Anything that is going to make that survivor feel more comfortable in leaving and doing well, in their journey.
And pets are non-judging too. Pets don't care, right?
Right.
They just want you to love them and give them love in
Right.
return. They want to love you the same way. So that was very insightful for me. I'm a pet lover too, and I know good, better, and different. They're gonna run to the door, hug you, kiss you. They don't care about all the other noise. They just want to be with you. And people, even our unhoused population, will not leave if their pets cannot go. They will not go to seek shelter or refuge without those pets. So that's very important.
Yes, it is.
And Kathy, you're with the City of San Antonio Department of Human Services. Can you talk a little bit about what your program does specifically to address both of these issues?
So our main connection is through the hotline, right? Hotline and street outreach. So the street outreach team is out there every day. I'm talking to people, putting them into the homeless information system, gathering the information. And the hotline was created in the time of COVID, right, when nobody could access resources or referrals. So the hotline primarily is that. As Judith said, we also do prevention assessments for people who are at risk of homelessness. We also put people into the system, information system, to get them assessed for different housing programs. And it's non-judgmental. It's the complete assessment that comes through close to home. That's the majority of what we do, because we're not a housing program, but we're putting people into the system to get the resources and referrals. If it's food, if it's clothes, if it's a place where your dog can go get their shots, right? All of those things, the resources and referrals are there for the community. We do collective collaboration with all of the agencies. If something's not there and somebody calls, the operator lets us know. We try to find it, and then we add it on our list of resources. So it's a constant motion of things, of evolution, because things change, right? Under this administration, maybe some programs are not active anymore. Well, where does it go now? Who can we collaborate with now to bring those same resources back to the community? So ours is really just putting people in a space where we can give them a tangible for resources and referrals and housing assistance and all those different things in collaboration with Close to Home and the other partners, Sam Ministries, Haven, Corazon. We work really closely with all of those agencies in collaborating through the continuum of care.
So if someone is experiencing either domestic violence or is facing the threat of becoming unhoused, if they were to call that line, you would refer them to all of these different agencies that could potentially help them based on their need?
We do the assessment. It goes into the system. Now, there are some times when someone is an extreme and we are reaching out. Hey, this person, Judith is really good at that, right? So Judith is like, hey, well, this person is this extenuating circumstance. They're in the car with their babies, right, which we cannot have. What else can we do as a community to find places for them? And if we can't find it in that continuum of care, there are other agencies outside of that may be having emergency housing for people to go to, right, who can provide emergency hotel stays to get them out of the situation or whatever that looks like. So the connection, the tie is there, and the collaboration is there.
Great. Judith, talk a little bit about Close to Home and elaborate a little bit on the community, the continuum of care, excuse me.
Okay, sure. So Close to Home is not a direct service agency. We oversee the homeless response system here in San Antonio and Bexar County. So we receive the funding from HUD, and then we support the community. So we're more oversight of strategic plans, policy, and procedures, and we really support what we call the Alliance to House Everyone. That's that 75 plus partners that Kathy was talking about earlier. So in our role, a continuum of care is just that. It's different sectors coming together to really provide that support network. So we meet people where they're at. So we have day centers that Kathy talked about. So maybe we do have people that are experiencing domestic violence or unsheltered. They can go get a hot meal, they can get a shower. So Corazon Day Center, Christian Assistance Ministries. And then we also have a youth-specific drop-in center, which is going to be the YAS Center that's operated through SAM Ministries. So they support youth 18 to 24. We do see that youth and young adults are experiencing domestic violence at higher rates. So having that space to be able to access is super important. We work with all of our shelters, again, to make sure that people that are visiting the shelters have access to get the assessment and get triaged. And then, of course, we have our access points, so Community Connections Hotline. We have other partners that do the assessments as well. But really, again, we're all working together. And then as Close to Home, we listen to our community. So what are the barriers? What are the needs? And that's where we use our governance to really discuss those. So we have street outreach groups that come together and talk about street outreach issues. We have our domestic violence subcommittee where we can come together and collaborate. So we knew, again, one of the issues we saw was we need more training on how to serve domestic violence survivors. Reach out to the experts. We don't ever want to reinvent the wheel, right? Because we're so busy servicing people. Right. So we reached out to Family Violence. They're actually the lead of our subcommittee for domestic violence, and then we have other partners that are there. Metro Health's there, City of San Antonio. So it's just all of us coming together and really having the space to have the conversation about what isn't working and what is working and how can we make it better. I think naming that is super important because we want to strive for continuous improvement. We want to make sure that we are meeting survivors. Like Kathy talked about, resources go away. So we have to go back to the drawing board on how we're going to support everybody. But I think that's super important to name, is that we have to have those conversations. I know just kind of working through like the problem solving process, I know a while back we had conversation about some of our outreach workers don't know how to get a client connected to the shelter. So we met with Marta and Paige and, some of their executive staff, and they actually said that Paige would be our liaison. So if a street outreach worker, somebody has a question, they can reach out to Paige and kind of answer those questions. But again, we talked about demystifying stigma. That's something that we also want to work to do too. So our role is really the collaborative piece. So we want to make sure that this system's talking to the other system. And then even if there are people aren't at the table, we want to get everybody at the table, because homelessness, again, is across all systems. So we want to make sure that people are talking about it.
And I think that's important too, so people aren't going from place to place to place. When you make the connection, it's a connection that's going to stick, right? The worst thing you can do is give somebody something and it doesn't work, because then you lose them and then they have to start all over again, right? So having the warm handoffs for us has been amazing from the hotline perspective, right? Because we don't see clients, we're talking to clients, we're putting information into the system, and the client is giving us everything they have in that vulnerable moment. To be able to connect it with somebody who's going to do something with it is the most important thing. So
I always say they're taking a leap of faith.
They are.
And so we need to catch them.
We need to catch them.
I've done anti-domestic violence and anti-sexual violence work for 25 years now, and I remember when I first started, we were really heavily into reducing a person's risk, right? It was this knowledge and this kind of concept that we know this is going to happen, so what are we doing to just reduce a person's risk of it happening again? And that to me was very survivor focused, right? It was focusing on teaching a person skill sets or giving them the capacity to not become a victim. Somewhere along midway through my 25 years, it shifted into more of a prevention approach, right? This idea that, we are doing everything we can to rescue people who are drowning. To use an analogy, we're rescuing people who are drowning. We're all at the banks of the river doing what we can, pulling people out, saving lives. But it's this idea that we have to stop for a second and go to the head of the river to keep people from falling in, right? And so thinking about how your programs are designed and how resources are designed in our community, they're built to intervene. They're built to help people who are already facing it or at the threat of facing it. What do you think your agencies are doing, or what can we do better in order to prevent it, to keep people from falling in the first place? And what are your agencies, or what are your concepts that you kind of live by that help address that?
I think normalizing the conversation about domestic violence,
say,
and then also creating the awareness. Like we said, people don't know, like, they check my Facebook messages, they're monitoring, some of those things they think, or like they glamorize domestic violence nowadays. And so it's like, really, how do we have those conversations about, it's okay to seek help. It's okay to, again, that's the biggest thing, ask for help and know that people are there to support you.
Yes, and educate people about red flags. A lot of times you might see one and you dismiss it, and more come. Because as a case manager, I used to do a group, and it was about domestic violence, and they were all survivors in it. And then as I talked about red flags and such, they were like, that's happening to me. So they didn't realize it, even though they were in the shelter.
And I think that's true, especially as far as communicating. People think domestic violence is just the physical part, right? It's not just that. Those red flags that you talk about, that's what you were talking about, getting people from jumping in. Knowing what it looks like from the very beginning can keep you from getting to the bottom of the river, and somebody can save you before you jump in, because there are red flags, right? As with everything. But identifying them, be like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't right. So since when can I go to my mom's house? Like that control thing, right? All those little triggers, they mean something.
Yeah, I think it's this idea of changing the conditions and behaviors that exist in our community that allow these kinds of things to happen. And when we do that, we ultimately will reduce it and or prevent it. So thank you for answering that. And we kind of already talked about the resources that currently exist, but I want to talk specifically or ask you about how domestic violence shelters and homeless service systems, which is what you both are in, are working together to effectively support survivors, and how can providers build trust with those folks who have experienced some sort of a systemic failure or they've experienced discrimination in the past getting services. We know that it is very difficult for folks who are undocumented to seek services. It's very hard sometimes for our trans-identified folks to get services or to seek services. So what are your systems doing together to build, two-part question, to build trust with those people who have faced this type of failure in the system before and discrimination, and how are y'all working together to solve that?
I think from where I said, it's about doing what you said you're going to do. You can't be out here talking about it and then not be about it when someone comes knocking on your door, right? And that's by any means necessary. Do you have to call somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, we got this client, can we do something about this, right? That's what it's about for me, from where I sit, right? I don't pretend to run the agencies, but to be aware of what the agencies can do and what they can help with. You can gain the trust by anybody by doing exactly what you said you're going to do. And if you're going to be able to provide the help, then say that. And then educate them on what that looks like at their pace, right? You can't shuffle people through these systems or processes. It has to be at the pace that the person is willing to go at, and then giving them the safe space to do that.
I agree completely. That's what I would say.
That's what you would have said?
Yes.
Okay, now, okay.
I think it's important to know, like, we work in a system, like we said, so we do have people at the front, you know, meeting people where they're at. Then we have housing providers. We're all about the collaboration and the warm handoff. So her front door is not going to just, once they get connected with the housing provider, be like, okay, good luck. No, they're going to make sure that the person is safe in their housing. Our housing providers are going to provide resources being the non-residential services Paige talked about. So it's really just making sure that we are staying with the survivor, making sure that they know the resources are available to them, and by no means making them have to take advantage of using them, but knowing that they're there when they're ready to take them. And then, like Kathy mentioned, if there's things that aren't working for people, maybe there's
Just
a
try something
misconnection.
different.
Yeah, let's go back and see what can we do systemically to fix the system. I know, again, awareness is a big thing right now. We want to make sure that's our first priority.
That's the first priority.
Yeah, creating that
Communicating,
awareness within the community of what domestic violence can look like, all the things that it can look like. And then I think, going back to something we talked about earlier, it's the question of why don't they leave? We really need to change the narrative, and it'd be like, when they're ready to leave, this is everything that's available to you. Yeah.
I was just going to say that too, because sometimes we get somebody who will come right to the door and turn around and go back, right?
And that's okay.
And letting them know that that's okay.
Right.
But just letting them know that this door doesn't shut close. It's revolving. Whenever you want to come through, that door is open for you to get what you need, right? And being okay with them saying, no matter how we see it, us being okay with saying, okay, well, if that's what you want to do, just know that we're here for you, right? Because when they come through on their own, that means they're ready. And we have to be able to catch them then.
And it's very unfortunate that the victim survivor has to leave the home the majority of the time, and the abuser stays. So that's another dynamic that it fosters anger and frustration.
Yeah. And we know that it takes an average of 7 to 8 times
Right.
to attempt to leave before you actually do.
walk through the door. Yeah.
And having these services available, and you said something very poignant, is knowing that if I show up at this door, I'm not ready, I turn around and I walk away, but knowing that that door is never shut to you from that point on. And I think that's important for the community to realize as well, because we carry the burden, I think, as family members, as friends, as loved ones, and sometimes we just don't have the capacity to help someone who is in this situation. One, because we've never experienced it, or two, because I don't know what to do, and I can get frustrated as a loved one. I can be angry at you because it's easy to just leave, and I don't understand why you don't leave. But we have to help the community understand as well that that's okay too, because not every one of us understands this issue fully the way that we do, but knowing that the doors on the outside are never shut.
And you brought up a pretty good point, because that behavior, that attitude keeps them from reaching back out to you again. So you're kind of leaving them more mentally anyway, to stay with the abuser. Right? So that mentality is like, well, if I can't come to you as my family member to help me, then I'm just really stuck here. Right. So making the community aware of the resources, what's available. Hey, you don't have to talk to me, but call this number and see if they can help you. Right? That should be the approach that we're taking.
So that leads us kind of into our final question, where I want to ask you how policymakers and funders and community members, how all of us can invest in these efforts to reduce and prevent not just domestic violence, but also homelessness, and then both of those two combined together. I want to ask you, what small but meaningful actions can individuals or other organizations do to really, truly make a difference?
I would say take the time to educate yourself about what the intersections of domestic violence and homelessness are, but also those things individually. Go out into the community and learn about the different resources. I know, like, Haven for Hope offers tours. A lot of our partner agencies offer tours. Go see if you, so that way, if a family member or somebody reaches out to you, you're able to tell them, hey, I've been to this place. I've seen what they offer. I know what they can do. You know, of course, we're always empowering. We're never forcing somebody to take our services. And then advocate for affordable housing. Honestly, that's like the biggest thing people can do, is if we have safe, affordable housing, then we can get people connected to services. And it takes some of the burden off the system to help more people.
Great. What about you, Paige?
I agree. That was my idea, is that If you're knowledgeable of the resources, you don't have to be knowledgeable of the system exactly, but you can direct them where to go for a professional to help them. Yeah, if they so choose.
If they so choose.
Yes.
And that's what I was going to say. Just information, just making every individual has a responsibility, I think, to know what's happening in the community around them. Making sure that people are informed, that we're getting the right information out there, that every story about domestic violence doesn't have to be a horror story. There's light at the end of the tunnel for them too, right? So when you think about all of those things together, give them a tangible, give them something that they can take back to spread among the community and just be a part of the community. We never know it's happening until we know that it's happening, right? Till we see it on the news. Oh my God, I knew her, right? Make it a safe space for people to at least come to you to get the information. And that's what we all have a responsibility in doing that for the community. Not just us here at the table, but everybody as a community, yeah.
And the last,
Go ahead.
really quick, the last thing is listen and believe.
Listen and believe,
Because that
yeah.
could be the one time that they reach out to somebody, and that could be life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't believe it, will make you think somebody else is going to believe it, right? Yeah.
I'm going to age myself.
Okay.
And I remember as a child of the 70s and 80s, a commercial where a couple was in their living room. No, I'm sorry, they were in bed and they were getting ready for bed, and they could hear arguing and crashing and yelling coming from an apartment above them. Mm-hmm. And I remember this couple looking at each other like, what do we do? Yeah. And so the husband reaches over as if to grab the phone, but instead turns off the light. Mm. And I remember that kind of stuck with me, because the tagline for that commercial was, if I remember correctly, was, "It is your business." Mm-hmm. And that to me is, I think, something really important for the community to understand. We don't have commercials like that anymore. They sometimes scared us a lot when we were younger.
There was one, I'm going to age myself too, where this little boy was cowering in the corner where his mom and dad were fighting. And that's always stuck with me, because that is what that child impression of what love looks like, right? So what do they do? Right? It could be generational as well, right?
And what you were talking about earlier kind of brought that commercial back up in my head, because I think that's an important message for the community to understand too, is that it is our business, right?
Right. If you want the community to change, you have to be a part of the change.
Right.
Yep, that's a true statement.
And I think in theory, it is an easy concept for us to say, see yourself in another person, and what would that be like for you? But in practice and in reality, nobody wants to, or it's really hard to do so, right? To actually do it. So let's end with this. What message would you like to give to a person in the community who is experiencing domestic violence and is under the threat of becoming unhoused, or is under the threat of some sort of instability? What message would you like to tell them today?
I would tell them that in all of your fears, moving forward can be worse than where you are. Just take the step. As Judith said, take the leap of faith, and somebody's going to be there to catch you. Whatever you think it is on the other side of getting help is where you need to just follow the light to there, right? If we can just get you to follow the light to there with all of our resources and all of our collaboration, there is somebody there who can catch you, right? You don't have to do this alone. There's a whole community waiting to encircle you, right? That would be my words.
What about you, Paige?
That they have hope, that they do not have to stay in this situation. And just like Kathy said, we have a whole community ready to help them, and that they have the strength within themselves to do that. They have been living in a version of hell, and they are stronger than they think they are.
They are the experts in their own life. We are just here to provide and empower. When they're ready, we are ready to support them.
And I would say, I believe you. I believe you. I think hearing that is foundational for someone to eventually have hope and to heal and to integrate this as part of their lives, because it changes your life forever. And changes the very being of who you are, and it changes your perception of safety in the world, right? When you experience these kinds of things. And so I would say, I believe you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. This
for
was
having us
absolutely, this was a great conversation, and we need to continue these conversations and continue to have them on a daily. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
I agree.
Of course.
Thank you.
Today's conversation has shed light on a truth that we no longer can ignore, that domestic violence and homelessness are intertwined by systems of inequity, poverty, and trauma. Preventing both domestic violence and homelessness begins with ensuring that every person has what they need to live free from fear, a safe home, a supportive community, and a system that sees their humanity. To anyone listening who wants to make a difference, start by believing survivors. Support local shelters, volunteer with outreach programs, and advocate for affordable housing. Every single small action adds up to lasting change. And if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, we want to help you find resources for support. There is a QR code on your screen you can scan using your smartphone to go to a city website with a listing of resources. If you are experiencing an emergency, please call or text 911. And to find resources, call 211 or visit their website. You can also call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE or text by sending the word START to 88788. This has been La Mesa. Thank you for listening.